At first glance, this is a story about fame, music, and celebrity relationships, but underneath it is something far more human. It is about what happens when a life built on love, work, and identity begins to unravel in silence. The spotlight does not protect anyone from emotional collapse. Sometimes it intensifies it. In the case of Kelly Clarkson, that collapse happened while the world still saw her as strong, warm, and endlessly composed. What looked like confidence from the outside was often quiet survival on the inside, as everything she built began to shift without warning. A marriage that became a system, not just a relationship. For Kelly Clarkson, marriage to Brandon Blackstock was not only emotional but structural. He was her husband, manager, and business partner, which meant their lives were deeply intertwined at every level. Career decisions, finances, travel, and family life all ran through the same connection point. Over time, that kind of merging can create stability, but it can also make separation feel impossible. When cracks began to form, it was not just a relationship under strain. It was an entire ecosystem beginning to break apart in ways that could not be easily undone or separated cleanly. Blockades that says more than words ever could. By 2019, the shift in the relationship between Kelly Clarkson and Brandon Blackstock was no longer hidden beneath activity or distraction. It was present in the silence between them. There were no dramatic public explosions, just emotional distance that grew harder to ignore. Silence in long relationships often becomes louder than arguments because it signals emotional withdrawal rather than conflict resolution. For Kelly, that silence represented confusion and disorientation, as the future she believed in no longer matched the reality she was living in behind closed doors, even while life outside continued normally. Filing for divorce and the collapse of certainty. When Kelly Clarkson filed for divorce from Brandon Blackstock in 2020, it marked not just a legal decision but an emotional turning point. She later expressed that she did not expect it to end this way, which added a layer of shock to the grief. Divorce is often described as the end of a relationship, but in her case, it also meant dismantling shared identity, shared work, and shared daily life. What remained was uncertainty about how to exist independently again. The emotional weight was not only about loss, but about rebuilding from a place where almost everything had once been shared. Another story of collapse in a different spotlight. While Kelly Clarkson was navigating her personal breakdown, Blake Shelton had already lived through a similar rupture years earlier, after his divorce from Miranda Lambert. Their relationship had once represented a country music ideal, glamorous, talented, and seemingly unshakable. When it ended in 2015, it surprised fans and reshaped public perception of both artists. For Blake, the aftermath included emotional struggle and identity confusion. He later described feeling lost, as if the version of himself tied to the relationship no longer existed, forcing him into a period of personal rebuilding and reflection. Recognition between people who have been broken. What connected Blake Shelton and Kelly Clarkson was not romance or coincidence, but recognition. When someone has experienced emotional collapse, they often recognize the same quiet damage in others. Blake had already lived through the disorienting aftermath of divorce, and when Kelly began her public and private unraveling, there was an unspoken understanding between them. It was the shared awareness of what silence, loss, and reinvention feel like. This kind of connection does not heal pain directly, but it reduces isolation, or which can be just as significant during emotional recovery. Gwen Stefani and the parallel journey through loss. The story expands further with Gwen Stefani, who experienced her own divorce from Gavin Rossdale after years of marriage and family life. Her public and private grief unfolded while she continued working in the entertainment industry, including her role on The Voice. At the same time, Blake Shelton was also present on the same show, creating an environment where two people healing from separate wounds existed in close proximity. Their eventual connection was not immediate or superficial, but rooted in shared understanding of emotional exhaustion and rebuilding after long-term relationships ended. Building a public life while privately breaking. During the same period, Kelly Clarkson was launching her talk show while privately navigating the breakdown of her marriage to Brandon Blackstock. This contrast between public performance and private difficulty created a unique emotional tension. On screen, she remained charismatic, humorous, and engaging, fulfilling expectations of daytime television. Off-screen, she was managing emotional instability and personal restructuring. The show itself became a form of emotional outlet, where music performances and conversations often carried deeper emotional undertones that reflected her internal experience more than scripted dialogue ever could. Music as expression. When words were not enough for Kelly Clarkson, performance became more than entertainment. It became emotional translation. Songs she performed on her show often took on new meaning in the context of her personal life. Lyrics about love, loss, and resilience resonated differently when performed during a time of emotional transition. Viewers began to notice that her interpretations felt deeply personal, as if she was communicating feelings that could not be directly stated in interviews. In this way, music became a bridge between private experience and public expression, allowing emotion to exist safely within structured performance. Legal battles and emotional restraint. As proceedings between Kelly Clarkson and Brandon Blackstock progressed, financial and custody arrangements became part of public discussion. Despite the visibility of the situation, Kelly maintained a relatively restrained public approach, avoiding public attacks or emotional escalation in the media. This restraint shaped public perception of her strength, not as absence of pain, but as controlled expression of it. At the same time, it highlighted how complex divorce becomes when personal history, children, and professional overlap all exist within the same shared system of life. Two different outcomes from similar pain. While Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani eventually built a new relationship and married, Kelly Clarkson walked a more solitary path of rebuilding after separation from Brandon Blackstock. Both paths involved loss, reflection, and transformation, but they unfolded differently. Blake and Gwen's story became one of shared healing, while Kelly's became one of individual reconstruction. Neither outcome is better or worse. They simply demonstrate how differently people respond to similar emotional breaks depending on timing, circumstances, and the structure of their lives. Conclusion: strength is not always loud or shared. In the end, the story of Kelly Clarkson is not defined by collapse, but by continuation. Life did not pause for her grief, nor did her career stop for her healing. She continued to perform, to host, and to create, even while rebuilding her personal world, piece by piece. Around her, others found companionship and shared recovery, but her journey often unfolded in solitude. Strength in this context is not dramatic or visible. It is the quiet decision to keep going when nothing feels stable. And sometimes, that kind of strength is the most difficult to recognize.